We are witnessing the biggest collapse of masculinity in video games, and a lot of people are enabling it. Some even defend this abomination that began with the rise of woke ideology, fearlessly denying reality and downplaying the problem. Watch this video to learn more. Let's get into it. The release of Halo Campaign Evolved is the perfect summary of the pathology the industry has been moving toward for years. A man losing his hair and then turning into a black woman is one of the smallest problems, although it's also hilariously ironic because that character was modeled after a developer working on the original Halo. It was almost certainly an accidental decision, but it perfectly illustrates how modern Halo abandons its roots in the name of progress. Do you realize there are people who look at this and actually enjoy it? They genuinely feel satisfaction in their heart because now they get to defend these decisions online, earning their progressive activist points and becoming another cog in the machine that's killing one game after another. It's like this woman who are saying we need feminism because of Afghanistan. But will you go to Afghanistan? No, you will sit in your safe, warm home recording TikToks how angry you are. Because how you can defend this woke slop where in the new Halo most female characters are untouchable while you can kill the male ones. And even if the game allows you a tiny bit of equality, the female NPC instantly one-shots you, even though you wear an advanced armor. Alright, sorry, I forgot the developers writing this game look like this. That explains why they thought this logic makes sense and why they added a character everyone immediately hated. We'll come back to her later. The world seems to be full of Neil Cookmans who simply have to put this exact type of character into every game, otherwise their brains would short circuit. The professional term for this, it's a girl boss, an obnoxious woman who knows everything better, does everything better, and treats guys like Master Chief as if they are beneath her. Because women in the world are supposedly oppressed by the patriarchy, so men deserve it. At least that's the sacred, although completely false, belief held by this very special group of people. Just look at the first game Neil worked on without supervision. The Last of Us Part 2. The first game builds Joel as a father who rediscovers the love he had for his daughter through a little girl who isn't even his own. It's a beautiful story about a flawed man who's willing to do absolutely anything to protect the person he cares about, even if it means watching the entire world burn. Then part 2 comes along and we are forced to play a trans woman who constantly shows men where they belong. And after spending the whole game building up the player's desire for revenge, that revenge is taken away from us. We also get one of the most disgusting scenes ever put in a video game, but hey, at least we learn what a perfect version of the world supposedly looks like. If you belong to the right group, you can avoid virtually any consequences. And of course, it's the exact group glorified by creators like Cookman. After The Last of Us Part 2 was showered with praise by people practically applauding with their butt cheeks, he decided he could go even further. That's how Intergalactic was born, a game where the protagonist shaves her head bald and manages to alienate players within a matter of seconds. Condescending, unlikable, rude, exactly what the modern audience supposedly loves. This is what always happens when gamers don't push back hard enough and don't show enough dissatisfaction. These developers simply take things one step further. Halo got its own girl boss too in the form of the Lieutenant Williams.
Robbins, take the team and give me a perimeter check.
You don't seem as impressed as the rest of your crew.
No, Sergeant Major, I'm not. Takes more than fancy armor and a good PR campaign to impress me.
The moment she sees Master Chief, her first reaction is, of course, disgust, and she immediately starts barking orders so that the other soldiers don't dare admit some guy. Johnson has to spell it out once again because apparently the modern audience are morons, while Lieutenant Williams makes sure everyone knows she's above all of this because she's just that amazing. Naturally, many players immediately tried to put a bullet in her, but surprise, you can't. The only upside to this entire progressive disaster is that the game doesn't end with the reveal of Master Chief being actually a black plus-size transgender woman all along. because it wouldn't be the first time a male protagonist has been replaced by a woman in a long-running franchise. A recent example is God of War Lao Fei, where people are desperately trying to justify replacing Kratos with his wife. The modern game developer's dream come true. You know, they are the type of people that think, I don't give a fuck what Kratos thinks, I give a fuck what his wife would think. Some argue it's just a spin-off, but we've already been told that the next God of War starring Kratos will continue the story told in Lao Fei. So on one hand, it's supposed supposedly a spin-off, yet on the other hand PlayStation itself calls it a main chapter and admits you'll need to know its story to understand the next game. All their games were made for men. They featured epic battles, sweat, testosterone and masculinity. Today we get stories where if a male protagonist manages to survive at all, he spends his time wondering what it even means to be a man and whether masculinity itself might actually be toxic. Some people point to Control Resonant as a counter-argument. The difference is that these people are also stupid because developers planned from the very beginning to tell the story from multiple perspectives, and that's exactly why Dylan's storyline was built up in the first game, because some stories are created with proper planning, with passion, while others simply throw in a cube motion captured by a Hollywood actor. Yet there will always be people defending those decisions, and there are countless examples. Gears of War 5 took a story about brotherhood and masculinity and turned it into a game centered around Kate Diaz, where the men are weak and useless while the women are strong, independent and basically perfect. And even if they are not perfect, then with the power of femininity they become perfect. It's no surprise that Gears of War E-Day is going back to a male protagonist. But remember that it's Microsoft we are talking about, so I'm sure there won't be any shortage of characters like Lieutenant Williams reminding the protagonist where his place is. Because fuck, we live in an era where even a game like Space Marine 2, you know, the one built around old school brotherhood and courage, has certain people insisting there must be a romance between the male characters. The thing is, in this game, it's nothing more than a fantasy of some crazy fans. In other modern games, however, you get the feeling that the people who used to write fanfiction are now trying to make games whose stories only make sense to themselves. Uncharted also decided to show us what it could do by replacing Nathan Drake with strong and independent female protagonists. The result? Much worse reviews than the previous games and plenty of complaints about the story. You know, the same story where women are somehow better at everything, even solving ancient archaeological mysteries, as if we hadn't already had Tomb Raider for decades. You could say this is all the result of woke ideology and handing beloved franchises over to talentless activists. But me? I agree with you. Spider-Man 2 is practically a textbook example of the modern approach to writing male protagonists. Peter Parker, one of the most beloved male characters in pop culture history, the one that in a cinema gets $1 billion in opening week, spends a large portion of the game feeling like someone who couldn't even wipe his own ass without help. Hey Miles, can you help me wipe my own ass? Every few minutes someone has to rescue him, correct him or explain how the world works. Miles and MJ? Of course they are better than some spider dude. The hated stealth missions from the first game are given even more attention here because why not? And when Peter finally gets the symbiote and starts acting more aggressively, the game immediately frames it as something that needs to be fixed as quickly as possible. Heaven forbid a man becomes a little too confident. The funniest part is that developers probably wanted to portray a flawed hero. The problem is that instead of building his character arc, they simply strip him of his competence so everyone else can shine. And that's exactly why so many players feel Peter had been demoted in his own series to the guy Miles keeps saving and MJ with a steroid enhanced jaw. Wolfenstein Youngblood proves that you can make a game the right way. More specifically, you can make the first two games, the New Order and the New Colossus, the right way, and then release a flop like Youngblood, replacing Blazkowicz with his daughters. Dialogue that sounds like teenagers after 5 energy drinks, a story with none of the weight of the previous games, enemies turned into bullet sponges and gameplay built around co-op. All of that played a major role in why Youngblood currently holds a 2.6 user score on Metacritic. Saints Row was always a series that didn't care about political correctness. It was exaggerated, distorted reflection of reality, and that's exactly why people loved it. Then came the 2022 reboot, and suddenly a gang of ruthless criminals was replaced by a group of characters that felt like they were written by developers trying to appeal to the modern audience. The greatest irony is that the reboot tried to be more modern, more safer, and more universally appealing, and the result was exact opposite. Instead of creating a new identity for a franchise, they erased the old one. And that's probably the biggest lesson the entire industry should learn. Players can forgive bad graphics or Fortnite graphics, bugs or even weak gameplay. But if you take away the franchise identity, there's almost nothing left. Is Is it really that hard to believe that the protagonist himself can be that identity, and that by erasing masculinity from games, developers are also losing the respect of a huge portion of their audience? And if you think GTA 6 will be any different, don't be so sure, because both GTA 5 and GTA Online have had jokes removed if they were considered offensive toward, privileged groups. In GTA 5 we got Trevor. A few years later, GTA Online gave us some of the blandest, most generic NPCs the franchise have ever seen. Everything is politically correct, sanitized, and completely devoid of creativity. All we can do is hope that as a self-contained story, GTA 6 will be allowed to take more risks than the online version ever could. Even in games where men are still the main protagonists, developers often seem incapable of writing compelling main characters. Crimson Desert gives us a male protagonist who's painfully bland, yet the game has been far more successful than something like Forspoken. Pragmata, despite exploring the theme of fatherhood, which drew many players to it, still couldn't avoid giving us a poorly defined male lead. You could change him to black, white, green, or even dog zapping Hassan, and it wouldn't make the slightest difference. Meanwhile, I still remember the ending of Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag, with the brilliantly written Edward Kenway finally confronting the consequences of his own actions. It's sad that whenever we talk about truly masculine, well-written male characters, we have to go back to games that came out years ago. There is so much talk about representation for minorities, women, and every other group that people seem to forget the largest audience in gaming: men. To get any meaningful example of masculinity, we have to go back to older games. Games from before men started being portrayed as helpless, emasculated, or outright replaced by women, or even killed in some cases, or by a more modern ideal. Even poor Commander Shepard wasn't spared. The scene where camera focuses on Miranda's ass was removed from the Legendary Edition. Modernizing games to fit today's woke and DEI standards is a cancer that's eating away this industry. And it will be very funny because since algorithm doesn't know my audience yet, there might be comments from people who will be very angry. As always, the comments are yours and the likes are mine, so make sure to leave one below this video and I will see you in the next one. Until then, take care, bye bye.